Good evening, my dear students. Again, the video is something is wrong with this. I'm not able to capture uh, the display, uh, which is the PowerPoint. So that's my problem. So let me try this again. Display capture. So this is really bad. Every day one has to struggle with this. Yeah. So I think I'll continue except the video is not there. We'll still start the session, right? Let me see whether I'm able to hear. So I think I'll continue except the video. Yeah. So good evening, my dear friends. I am Dr. Santhosh Babu IAS here. So I don't know why this video is not there. Yeah. God knows what is happening here. At least you can see the PowerPoint to that extent. So I think this is a problem with the Mac. I'll continue with this. I'm just hoping that you can hear me. So I think this is a problem with the Mac. Okay. I'm Dr. Santhosh Babu IAS here, your YouTube educator in Unacademy. I would seriously suggest that you come and join the Plus course that I teach from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. every day, except on Saturdays, maybe certain Saturdays also, right? So we had discussed a whole lot of stuff and we have reached development dynamics, which is one of the most important chapters in public administration, optional. So we will discuss, this is the what you see on the screen right now is the syllabus, which is the concept of development, changing profile of development administration, what is known as anti-development thesis, what is the bureaucracy to do with the development, strong state versus the market debate, impact of liberalization, LPG on administration developing countries, women and development, the self-help group movement. So women in development will be taken paper 2 because anyways that's captured there, right? So let's go and see how we are building up this. This is the way we are studying. We'll first talk about the concept of development. What are the contribution of various thinkers? The meaning, nature, scope and significance of development administration. If you remember, first chapter of public administration is called meaning, nature, scope and significance of public administration. So here we are speaking about the meaning, nature, scope and significance of development administration. So development administration is slightly different from public administration, or it's a plus for public administration. Then the role of bureaucracy in development, development dynamics, Impact of liberalization, privatization, globalization on development, state versus market debate, role of state in development, anti-development thesis, and women in development. Will take it up in paper 2. So what is development administration? Coined by an Indian scholar, Goswami in 1955, but then taken over completely by the Americans. As usual, the Americans come out with the theories. We Indians will follow it. But the phrase development administration was given by U.L. Goswami in 1955. Development administration is public administration, but with a difference. So what happens in public administration is that to engender public development administration, new agencies have to be formed. Second is, old agencies can be refashioned, right? And many things will happen to the internal structure and hierarchy of the organization. So even if you are refashioning it. So these are the things which happen when public administration has to take up what is called development administration. Because the reason is that, public administration was always about regulation, law and order, the regulatory activities. That's why, many IAS officers always want to become what is called an additional collector development. Why? They don't want to become a additional collector revenue. No IAS officer ever wants to become an additional collector revenue, because you're always talking about, agriculture income tax, this, that, the village accounts and stuff like that, which is quite boring. It has nothing to do with development. It's basically a regulatory. All IAS officers want to take up jobs of municipal administration, wants to take up jobs of rural development, etc. Why? Because that's where the action is, right? So these are things that you need to do within the structure of the organization if you have to take up development administration. Now, what are the factors responsible for the emergence of development administration? One is, the whole thing started after World War II ended. There were two things that happened. World War II had devastated Europe, that you know. World War II also saw the decolonization process. That is, the countries which are colonized, much of Africa, India, Southeast Asia, etc., felt the heat because they had no money. First, they was devastated by the war. Second, earlier they were, plundering the country. We say that around $44 trillion of Indian money was taken out, or Indian assets were taken out to the UK. And today we are trying to become what? From a $2 trillion economy to a $5 trillion economy. Just imagine that, 44 trillion, or $40 trillion. Just imagine $44 trillion was taken out. But this was taken out much earlier. Towards 1900s and all, Britain found it extremely difficult to handle India. They had to pump back money in India. So a lot of money was coming out from Britain. So there are two reasons. One was the war, second was the colonizers were spending much more now because the expectations of people had gone up because of democracy, civil service, etc. So one is decolonization. Second is, there was a plan called the Marshall Plan immediately after, the multilateral institutions, etc., came into being, which is the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, etc. And the US decided to fund the redevelopment of the war-affected European countries. It is called the Marshall Plan. So Marshall Plan was basically for reconstruction. And at the same time, in 1950, the Southeast Asian nations had something called a Colombo Plan. Colombo is basically the capital of Sri Lanka, so the plan was formulated there. So that is again for the basically for reconstruction, development of countries devastated by the colonizing process, right? And third was, and most important, was the establishment of what is called the Comparative Administration Group under the leadership of Waldo, right? So these are the three factors, and you cannot forget it: decolonization, economic assistance, third CAG, Comparative Administration Group, right? Now, why did they choose public administration for development administration? Why couldn't they have chosen a different agency? The reasons are not far to seek. One is that, democracy was just too new to India and other countries like this. And so the political parties did not have too much presence at the field level. That is one of the reasons. Then there was nothing called an NGO in the field. India never had NGOs at 1947 onwards. Only in the recent last 30 years has NGOs been coming up. Third was that, the bureaucracy, the civil service, Indian civil service, or the bureaucracy was well entrenched and established. So it was thought fit. And this thinker, what is his name? He's the main thinker. Who is the thinker? Where is he? No. I'm sorry. I just over jumped, I think. Because it is Widener who always talked about the bureaucracy being the best agency to do what's called public administration. So Widener, Weidner, Widener was the person who talked always about the bureaucracy that can implement development administration. Right? Now, what are the features of development administration? Action and goal oriented. This is actually Widener's words. So it involves action. It also involves goals to be achieved in a particular time frame. That's why there is a time orientation also here. If you can see it in green, projects are supposed to be completed in a year's time, or maximum 2 years' time, or if you're building a dam, 5 years' time. But definitely there is a time orientation. So the whole idea was to do this action and goal orientation to ensure what is called socio-economic change. And the difference that you can see is that now you're looking at clients, now you're looking at citizens. What is it that they want? Shouldn't we involve them? Shouldn't we make them participate in this process? Or should it be a top-down approach? Right? So participation oriented, time oriented, commitment oriented, and you're supposed to be responsive to the people. And there was an element of what is called ecological orientation, that is environmental orientation, innovativeness, etc. So these are the features of development administration. But at that point of time, let me also tell you that India had adopted a top-down approach. It's not like this, exactly, because development administration started in the 1950s, right? India had adopted a top-down approach. What is it called? The Mahalanobis model, which is the public sector should occupy the commanding heights of the economy. And what will happen to the poor people? There will be a trickle-down effect to the poor people. That was the economic model that India had adopted. And I would say they also wanted action and goal orientation. They also wanted socio-economic change. But client orientation, participation orientation, it all happened maybe towards the 1990s, right? So what are the different definitions of development administration? So you need to think about the thinkers, right? So it's very important to understand that a group of thinkers brought about development administration. One is Montgomery, who said that development is usually conceived as an aspect of change that is desirable, broadly predicted or planned, and administered or at least influenced by government. So basically simple, that government only can bring about development administration or can bring about development. So basically it's a planned process and it's a change for the good. This is what Montgomery said. Now, this is very important, and please understand, even this particular concept may take the next 1 hour because you need to understand this. We have covered this in the previous chapter on comparative CPA, comparative public administration, when we talked about RICS. So RICS concept of development is simple. The societies of the world are divided into 3 parts. 3 are the countries of the world. One is fused countries, prismatic countries, and diffracted countries. Right? Fused will become over a period of time prismatic, and prismatic will become diffracted. So the most developed is prismatic, diffracted, and the least developed is fused countries. So what happens here is, in a fused countries, there is only one structure performing all functions. So it could be the king, or could be a dictator. He will be performing the functions of the legislature, the executive, the judiciary. He will be the judge, jury, and executioner. There is nobody else. The whole administration is based on what is called the spoils system. So that's the fused system. In a few system, you don't have discretions. You don't have choices. That's as simple as that. Absolutely no choices in a few system. Whereas in a diffracted system, you have too many organizations or too many structures performing too many functions, or one structure specialized for one function, or one function is being done by many structures, etc. So that's the kind of differentiation and integration that happens in a diffracted society. So what happens in development is that there is increasing autonomy or discretion of social systems, made possible by rising levels of diffraction. So we are moving towards diffraction. So you'll have more choices. So process of increasing autonomy or discretion. Discretion is the ability to choose among alternatives. So autonomy of social systems made possible by rising levels of diffraction. Please understand this. I am not able to draw it because for some reason this pen is not working on my Mac. My pen tab is not working on my Mac, so I am in a sense handicapped. You also, I'm sure, are not able to view me, so that's also a problem. But I hope you can hear this, so that we can, at least you can see this and try to understand. I can move the cursor. I think you can possibly see the cursor at least moving, right? Or I can even, if I touch it, it moves, right? So discretion is the ability to choose among alternatives. And what is diffraction? Diffraction refers to the degree of differentiation and integration in a social system. So we are talking about social system means what? It can be a country, it can be a state, it can be a district, whatever. But there's a social system. It's a behavioral concept, right? Organizations are social structures consisting of dynamic human beings. Who said that? Chester Bernard, the foremost behavioral scientist. So diffraction refers to the degree of differentiation and integration in a social system. And the key to understanding this concept lies in understanding the meanings of differentiation and integration. Differentiation means what? Many structures perform many functions. So for each function, there's a structure ready to perform that. That's the meaning of differentiation, right? Okay, you want an Ayurveda doctor's service, you will have an Ayurveda hospital. You want a Siddha doctor's service, you'll have a Siddha hospital. So structure is there and the function is performed by that. So for a function, there's a structure ready for it. That's called the differentiation, right? India is a highly differentiated country that way. But integration means what? Integration means the coordination between these structures. That's where India fails. India has got very good differentiation but low levels of integration. America has high levels of differentiation and high levels of differentiation, but still we don't call it a prismatic country because they also exhibit features of we don't still call it a diffracted country because they still show features of a prismatic country, which are corruption, nepotism, you name it, all the things, the what's called formalism, heterogeneity, overlapping, all this you'll find in America also. That's why you don't see it as a diffracted country. But what Briggs and Strand says is the whole idea is to move to become a refracted country, right? So where your differentiation and integration are very high. So so I have to explain that, but let's define that. Differentiation means existence of a situation in which every function has a corresponding specialized structure for its performance. Integration means a mechanism to tie together, to link up, to mesh, and to coordinate various kinds of specialized roles or the structures. The levels of differentiation integration represent different refracted and prismatic conditions of development. I don't need to, this is not rocket science, it's very simple. Now, if the society is highly differentiated and poorly integrated, then it becomes what is called a prismatic country. That society is prismatic, highly differentiated, poorly integrated. Higher the levels of differentiation integration, the greater the level of development. Lower the level, lower the development. And even in a prismatic country, there could be malarrangement between differentiation and integration, resulting in different levels of prismatic conditions. So a prismatic condition could be A1, A2, A3, A4, depending on these integrations and differentiations. Okay, so please understand this. Development does not simply mean moving forward. In the words of Riggs, it means increasing levels of discretion or autonomy in a society, in a social system, with increasing levels of diffraction. As simple as that. And for diffraction to happen, there should be differentiation and integration. Differentiation is the situation in which each function has a structure ready to perform that function. And integration is the coordination between these structures and functions. Got it? It's as simple as that. And moving forward, we could also say go slightly more nuanced or deeper into differentiation integration. Differentiation is affected by two factors: technology factors and non-technology factors. So you will know that the highly developed countries are highly based on technology. You take an example of the Jaravas in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Do they use any technology? No. That's why they are in a very backward condition, right? No, we could say it's backward, but that's a very good condition as far as they are concerned. Or if you ask any environmentalists, they say they are in unison with nature. But somebody like you and me would say they are backward. The point is, the differentiation is not there. It's a very fused structure in, let's say, the tribes of Andaman, right? So when there's higher technology, it leads to higher differentiation. When there's lower technology, it leads to lower differentiation. Similarly, integration has also two factors. One is called penetration and second is called participation. Penetration is by government, participation is by the citizens. Penetration means the ability of the government to reach out to the nook and corner of the country with their policies and programs, right? That's the way government does it. It will penetrate, it will find some way to reach the programs to the field. And what is participation? It's not just simply partaking of the policies and programs, but doing that under the ambit of law, accepting the ambit of law. That's very important. So penetration and participation. Let's have a look at it. So Riggs further explained this concept of development by analyzing factors affecting differentiation and integration. The level of differentiation in any country depends on the technological and non-technological factors. The more the technology, the higher the level of differentiation. And integration depends on penetration and participation. Penetration is the ability of a government to make and carry out decisions throughout the country. And participation is the receptivity to law and the willingness to help carry out the laws and policies of the government. Now, what happens in a prismatic society is high levels of differentiation but low levels of coordination or integration. Prismatic societies are thus inefficient. You know this much. So criticisms of Riggs is quite huge. We have studied that in Comparative Public Administration. There are around 12 criticisms of Riggs policy. We'll just read out a few. He said it's from fused to prismatic to diffract societies. That's how development happened. But he did not explain how this transformation takes place. He did not change variables in his model, making it a comparative static model. So it is treated as a comparative static model. So many of the differences we have studied, there are 12 differences, criticisms of Riggs that we have studied in Comparative Public Administration. We don't need to bring it here, that is past. But if you want to go and read it, please read it in Comparative Public Administration, right? Next thinker that we have on board is Widener. So Widener says the concept of development is usually defined in terms of economic growth. And he's a person who said development administration as an action-oriented, change-oriented, goal-oriented administrative system. And he wanted the bureaucracy to bring about this change. and they should not only have economic growth in terms of GDP, but per capita income rise, infrastructure development, industrialization, etc. And he wanted this top-down approach that we adopted. And people will anyway receive the fruits of development through what is called the trickle down. So, in development administration, what happens to the structure? We told in the first slide that new structures will be created, or new organizations will be created for development administration, for implementing development administration, or existing ones will be refashioned in such a way that the internal authority structure, hierarchy, etc. will have to be differently conceived, and even the role of leadership in encouraging and guiding programs of developmental activities needs re-examination, because the leadership has so far been used to saying do this, do that, and people do because it's about regulation. Now when you come to development, it's a different ball game altogether. People will not agree to you unless they accept your authority. That's the way Church of Bernard said, acceptance is the basis of authority. You simply can't shout saying that your authority will be accepted. You need teams to work with you, and these have to be multidisciplinary teams, right? Now, concept of development is multi-dimensional. There is political development, economic growth, social and cultural development, administrative development, balanced regional development, removing regional inequalities, inclusive growth, sustainable development, gender development, ethical development. So, development does not simply mean, economic growth. Everybody disagrees with that. Things have to mature from all aspects, right? See, economic growth could be an indicator whether we are going up or we are going down. Whether the different subsystems of administration are also growing is also very important. The political subsystem, for example. Like Mary Parker Foley, she was against what's called the representative democracy. She said that there's no meaning in it. It's another way of, in a few seconds you put a ballot and your power is gone. For the next 5 years, you are actually giving your powers to a group of people. Where is the participation? Where is the democracy here? So that's why Mary Parker Foley always felt that it should be participatory democracy. People should be the focus, not government. Government is only a means to achieve an end, which is to allow people to reach their zenith in their genius, right? So the objective is to transform representative democracy into participatory democracy by increasing awareness among citizens about their rights. It makes governments accountable to the people for their performance. So a rights-based kind of approach. How do you make people understand their rights? That's how political development happens. Generally, we will say, no, these politicians don't want people to learn. That's true in a sense because politicians are vote-seeking, rent-seeking, bribe-seeking, right? And bureaucrats are self-aggrandizing. Both are there only for their self-preservation. They are not there for the ultimate, what's called the ultimate public weal. They are not there for that. That's what public choice thinkers said, right? It is first there, my hunger, and then only, what they say in an aeroplane if there's turbulence, etc., the oxygen thing will fall down. And before you help others, you please secure your interest first. Your oxygen is very important, then only you can help others. So possibly that's the reason why politician also thinks that let me first secure my future before I secure the future of my country. That's the way it is. So political development is very critical in the development administration that we are talking about, right? And it has to be engendered. We need to ensure that our politicians are educated, they are visionaries, they are able to put together projects and policies for the welfare of the people, right? If you elect uneducated people, There have been very good uneducated people who become extremely good statesmen, etc. But there's very few and far between, and it's extremely anecdotal. You don't see it across. You will not see a Kamarajar across India, right? You will not see many people like that. Those are rare gems which will come out once in a millennium, right? But otherwise, you will find all these politicians are the same quality. Now we need them all to become highly educated, thinking for the country, and coming out of their own psychological yoke, which is self-preservation. Economic growth should focus on GDP per capita income, developing infrastructure, ensuring industrialization, creating employment, etc. So basically, we are talking about livelihoods and industrialization, etc. Right? So political development, economic development. We are not even saying economic growth, should be economic development. Social and cultural development. If you remember, 1947 onwards, Nehru was there for 16 years. So Nehru was always having, Jawaharlal Nehru always had what is called the scientific temper. That's why during his times, a lot of IITs were created, a lot of dams were created, a lot of research and development also happened during this period of time. The whole idea was to create a scientific temper, because India was a deeply superstitious country, right? Even today, people are very superstitious, right? Before you go for a particular thing, you always look at whether it's Rahu Gala or Rahu Kalam is it on time, is it the best time, etc. I wonder whether the Americans do it, but we do it very meticulously. At least I don't do it, my wife does it. But she's also a very highly educated person, a highly qualified doctor, but she also looks at times. So moving in the direction of rationality and scientific temper by eradicating social evils and by removing cultural inequalities. That's the social and cultural development. Much more you can write. You just flag this in your mind. Administrative development. Enhancing the productive capacity of civil servants so that they can realize the objectives of development administration. That's why, IAS officers frequently are asked to come for refresher courses, not refreshment, because they get a lot of refreshment, but refresher courses in Missouri, in Nainital, we go abroad to Korea, US, etc. Why? Because we need to be rejuvenated. Our productive capacity should be improved. The knowledge of public administration should come to them. What is obtaining in Korea? What is being used as a development administration tool in the US? That they have such good results that we don't have. So we need to equip ourselves. Balanced regional development. This is possibly a figment, right? So generally in India, we'll see the south a lot more developed than the north. So I don't know whether balanced regional development has been a solution. Has it ever happened? Why is it that other states are not developing as fast as the south or the west, for that matter, right? So there's a problem here. So what we are saying is that the development process mostly results in the creation of islands of prosperity in an ocean of poverty. The sixth one is the same, removing regional inequalities. Inclusive growth, you'll keep hearing this over and over again, right? Inclusive growth. When I was an additional collector, development, I hardly heard of this. Inclusive growth, the word inclusive growth. But when I became a collector, that was a buzzword. So many years later. So what happens to development is the rich becomes richer and the poor becomes poorer. Or the poor may have, let's say the difference was like this. The poor may have stepped 2 steps up. The rich would have gone here, very high. So there's inequalities increase in the distribution of income and wealth. So it's basically a problem of non-equitable development, right? So this is very easy to understand in an income scenario also. So let's assume that in a family, let's assume that the father is a breadwinner, and he is, let's say he's a taxi driver, and he brings home, let's say, 1,000 rupees per day after expenses, everything, 1,000 rupees per day, or let's say 500 rupees per day. but he's managed to teach his children to study well, etc. And one of the sons become an MBA. Now he joins one of the top big Bs, like PwC or Deloitte or Sangli or any of these companies. And what is his initial salary? His salary will be, let's say, a couple of lakhs per month. Now father has been earning 15,000 a month. The son is earning around a couple of lakhs a month. Now the father, let's assume over a period of time, 10 years, another 10 years, the father's 15,000 will become 30,000. Yes, double. But the sons may go on to become 10 lakhs. This is the point. This is exactly the point. That widening inequalities, even within the same family, you will find this, because everybody is not equally educated, equally endowed. They don't reach particular levels of skills. So this will keep happening, right? This will continue to happen, because until we reach a position where everybody can pick and choose from among skills, that's not there anymore. People are just struggling to pass the 10th standard and +2, etc., and then look around for a job. What will they get? They'll get very basic sustenance jobs, right? And it will increase only in what is called geometric proportion. Whereas the salaries of civil service, salaries of MBAs in the private sector, etc., will go by many times, multiple proportions, right? So we have to have inclusive growth. Sustainable development is something very recent. I don't think development administration had sustainable development as a goal in the 1950s. But today, development administration process takes cognizance of the environment, the damage that has been done to the ecological systems. The objective of sustainable development is to ensure that the needs of future generations are not compromised while fulfilling the desires of the present generation. Right? Gender development, again a very recent thing. So development administration is 1950s, but we are talking about the current development administration. Gender development, 50% of the population we cannot wish away. They have equal opportunities and they have equal potential, but they don't have equal opportunities. And the government should bring out policies in such a way that we encourage every girl to pass the 10th standard +2 degree and stand on her economic feet. Only then these countries will become balanced growth. Only then they will achieve balanced growth. By keeping 50% of our population at a subsistence levels or dependent on man is not only cruel, but it's a bad economic path that you can take. Ethical development, improving the ethical infrastructure of society. What is happening to society? Society is becoming corrupt by the day, because they realize that officials are making money, let's make money also. So they wait for that day for elections when politicians come to bribe the people, and they're willing to be bribed without knowing that the 5 or 10,000 rupees that they get will get over in 2 days, but these guys will be there for the next 5 years, right? That's the kind of problems that we are facing in this development administration, when people are willing to compromise for a 5,000 rupees. My point is, the patriotism means doing the least damage to the country. And if you take money, that's a huge damage that you're doing to society. A single civil servant or even a peon taking money anywhere in the official universe is going to affect the organization. It's going to affect the credibility of the organization. It's going to affect the goals of the organization, right? So that's why this ethical infrastructure society has to be improved, right? We'll take a pause here and look at what are the differences between traditional public administration and development administration. So traditional public administration means the classical thinkers, the classical organizations. They always wanted to ensure stability with continuity. Stability and continuity. Whereas development administration is about change with continuity. Get the point? There's a big difference here itself. Then Traditional public administration of Taylor, scientific management movement of Taylor, or the administrative management theory of Henry Fayol, or the classical theories of Urwik and Gulick, or the bureaucratic theory by Max Weber, all had what is called value neutrality. Whereas development administration is about values. It's value loaded in a sense, you could say. So value neutrality means what? Keep your eyes closed. Don't have a heart. Just implement what the politician says, which is because politicians have the values and the facts. You're not supposed to have values, facts. You're only supposed to have rules and regulations. Implement with rules and regulations. And when you keep doing that, the rules and regulations become the end itself. And that's what we call as goal displacement. So people start asking for bribes, etc. Right? Why? Now because you have the entire universe under your control, the official universe. That's what I'm talking about. So value neutrality will lead to high corruption, right? So that's why we need a value loaded administration in development administration. Third is 2 E's, and there are actually 3 E's. Traditional public administration is about efficiency, economy, and effectiveness, whereas development administration is about equity, equality, and ethics, right? Equity, equality, and ethics. Traditional public administration, as I said, operation successful, patient died. So rule orientation, whereas development administration is about outcome orientation. Okay, invested in making people literate. What is the literacy rate before you started? 35%. What is the literacy rate now? 70%. So there's been a huge increase in a short time. So that's what's called outcome orientation, right? Traditional public administration is an open closed systems theory, closed systems approach, or closed systems method, which means what? That the subsystems of administration does not affect the effectiveness of maximization of effectiveness of efficiency. It does not affect the subsystems. Whereas in an open systems approach or a situational design approach, every subsystem affects bureaucracy, and bureaucracy also affects these subsystems. What are the subsystems? As we said, social, political, cultural, economic, communication subsystem, technology subsystem. So all subsystems interact with bureaucracy, and because of that, the maximization of efficiency is not possible in a development administration thing. Traditional public administration, as we said, it's about value neutrality, economy, efficiency, rule orientation, closed system. What does it lead to? It leads to what's called the politics administration dichotomy, where politicians only give the rules and only give the policies based on values and facts, and the bureaucrat is supposed to be implementing those values and facts with a blinkered eye by using what's called rules and regulations. Whereas in development administration, there's supposed to be a close coordination between the political executive and the bureaucracy. Right. In traditional public administration, when we think about it, we think about Max Weber and Frederick Taylor, etc. So impersonal order based on written communication is one of the biggest features of what is called the traditional public administration. Whereas development administration is about interpersonal relations. This is about informality, informal organizations within formal organizations. Informal organizations within formal organizations, right? Then in traditional public administration, we talk about hierarchy. Development administration, we said, should be participatory, right? You know what's happened in Kerala? What has happened is very interesting. Around 6 panchayats have said that, people come into the office, and these panchayats are big. We are not talking about the typical Indian panchayat. Kerala panchayats only 1,000 in number, around 960, and each panchayat, we don't know where the panchayat starts, where it ends, nobody knows. And these are very powerful because 47% of the state budget is given to the local bodies. So 6 panchayats have declared that anybody who comes to the office shall not call them sir or madam. They will state the facts and get lost. There's no sirring anymore, because that's a very British system, right? Oh, that's a very interesting thing, because that's about participation. It's not about hierarchy now anymore, because the Panchayat president is heard saying, she says, these people are coming to because they have paid us to come do this job, and we are the servants. They are not the servants. We have to treat them with respect. They come here because, for example, you employ a driver at your home. What does that mean? He's accountable to you. So similarly, the people have appointed you as a Panchayat president, selected or elected or whatever, but they have appointed you. So you are their servant and they are the master, correct? So that's the difference between hierarchy and participation. In traditional public administration, there's centralization of power, whereas in development administration is more about the 73rd and 74th amendments, which is about taking decentralization to the lowest levels of the hierarchy. Traditional public administration does not take time into consideration. There's no value for time in traditional public administration, whereas development administration, time is very important. You have to finish projects. If you're an additional collector development in any of the districts, when you become an IAS officer after sub-collectorship, then you will deal only with projects. You have to deal with roads, you have to deal with dams, you have to deal with drenches, you have to deal with houses. All these things are projects, and you're supposed to close that within a particular financial year. It should not spill over. So we have a list of what is called spillover works. Whatever you do, there will still be spillover because there are too many variables. For example, an MP lad, that is Member of Parliament, Local Area Development, that funding is there, around 10 crores at that point of time. I don't know, it should have increased by now. And the collector's job is to keep calling the MP or the MLA, in the case of MLA CDS. Sir, please, you are supposed to have so many crores. You are given that money only for 2 crores. You need to give for 5 crores. Sir, please give this. And I am sending you a list. Please sanction all this. He may or may not sanction because he has other demands on it. So this takes a long time. And I've seen cases where the MP does not give until it's 31/3 because he is also bargaining for something. So this is what happens. Time is of essence, and sometimes you're not able to complete it because you don't get the letters of accent from the powers that be. And traditional public administration is a bottom-up approach. It's about people, whereas not traditional public administration. Development administration is about bottoms-up approach. Traditional public administration is top-down approach. And in 12, if you read moral responsibility of the people, means that leadership. Leadership is about moral responsibility of the people. That is, even when you have the capability to misuse your office for your personal purposes, you still don't give in to that temptation. That's called moral leadership or moral responsibility. Whereas leadership in development administration era is about legal accountability. That is, if you don't, if you default in that, you can go to jail. That's what you mean by legal accountability. There's complete secrecy in governance in traditional public administration, whereas complete transparency and openness is what is practiced in development administration. Traditional public administration is status quo in nature, whereas development administration is dynamic in nature. And this is the most important statement. If you miss this, you're going to miss the bus, let me tell you. That is, people are treated as subjects to be governed in traditional public administration, whereas people are treated as citizens to be empowered in development administration. What a world of difference. And beautifully said, subjects to be governed versus citizens to be empowered. Subjects to be governed versus citizens to be empowered. Traditional public administration is very proactive in nature. Traditional public administration is very reactive in nature. That is, after the problems happen, they will find a solution. Whereas development administration is about trying to find solutions to non-existing problems. That is, anticipation of problems. And traditional public administration is about bureaucratic attitudes. What should I do for you? Whereas in development administration is about what can I do for you? Democratic values. Got it? So these are the 17 differences, and I seriously suggest that you learn all these differences because it's so easy to remember. It's not at all difficult, right? Just need to apply your mind and all this will come rushing to you. But you need to, unless you read traditional public administration, you will not be able to understand this. So you have to read all the theories. Unless you know all the theories, and the way we have reached here in development administration is very significant. We are not gone by the syllabus. In a way, we have tried to bypass the syllabus because this is the logical way to study it. And when you go to paper 2, which is about Indian administration, it becomes extremely easy for you to understand, right? Let me see whether anybody is watching this program. Yeah, somebody is still continuing to be there. So those are the differences. Now, what are the characteristics? We said all this. If you see the differences, these are the characteristics also. So I don't think you need to read this particular slide. So what is the role of bureaucracy in development? We said that the bureaucracy was supposed to be entrusted with this role because of 4 reasons. One is the absence of people, political people at the field level. Second is the absence of pressure groups like NGOs, etc. Third is that the civil service had become established, entrenched. And fourth is that we could, change the attitudes. That's fine. So Max Weber said that in a parliamentary democracy, political executive is responsible for policy formulation, and the bureaucracy is responsible for implementation. Right? So when you bring development administration also, that's the same role that the bureaucracy will play, albeit in a different way. So political executive must take into consideration facts and values, whereas the bureaucracy should follow the rules and regulations as part of what's called the balanced polity. This leads to what? It leads to what's called goal displacement, because the means becomes the ends. Everybody fights for rules and regulations. Finally, you don't, Narayana Murthy, the chairman of Infosys, he says the rules and regulations are so tough that he had to go to Delhi 50 times to get hold of that one computer they had managed to import from the US. Just imagine that. Just imagine that today it requires one phone call. And those times when he was an entrepreneur, he was entrusted with the responsibility of finding out what happened to the computer that we imported from the US. And poor man had to travel many times to Delhi. He says 50 times to Delhi to get hold of the computer because everybody was concerned with what's called rules and regulations. So the means were becoming the ends. And because of rules and regulations, people have to be bribed. That's what rules and regulations does, right? Somebody says rules, then obviously you'll show you the money, because that's a way to get over the rules and regulations, right? They say rules are for fools, and I completely agree with it. Rules we should follow. The spirit of the rule is more important than the rule itself. The spirit of the rule is very, very important, right? Now suppose you're supposed to wear a helmet while riding a motorbike, right? That's a rule. But suppose you are riding on the road and forgot to take the helmet because you need to help somebody in danger. That's somebody who's catching you on the road, could be a policeman. Will you be able to understand it? Why you didn't wear a helmet? That's because you forgot to wear a helmet because you're rushing ahead to save a human life. So the spirit of the rule is more important. So Max Weber also said that bureaucracy is an instrument in the hands of the political executive to realize the objectives of development. So what is the role of bureaucracy in development through Max Weber. MP Foley, she said that anyways the politician and the bureaucrat will come to fisticuffs. There will be fights because both their objectives are different. Because the political executive is interested in short-term political gains, populism. Bureaucracy comes from a different background. They come from the elite class of society. They are permanent. So they give importance to economic rationality in public policy formulation. So this will result in conflict between the political populism and the rationality. That is between the politician and the bureaucrat. Now, MP Foley being MP Foley, she talked about what's called constructive conflict, which means if anything can come out of it as good, then it's a good thing. It becomes what is called an integrated solution. Integration happens here. This integration is different, right? So she talked about conflict as constructive conflict, something which is good, which will put facts on the table so that everybody comes to know and everybody benefits from it. Right. Warren Bennis, this man predicted the end of bureaucracy because he said that these generalist bureaucrats, he said, what is it called? Generalist, all-encompassing bureaucrat will be replaced by specialists. And specialists also are bureaucrats. They'll also acquire the same characters as the bureaucrat. So I don't know why Warren Bennis didn't understand this. If you replace the IAS with SAI, still it will be the same. There will not be a difference. Unless you bring about leadership differences. Unless you say, communicate a compelling aspiration. It will not happen. The bureaucracy will continue to be like that. So he said the bureaucracy will end. And he was true when NPM came, New Public Management came into being. That's the time when there was something called marketization happening. Second was the adoption of the practices of the private sector in the government sector was being considered on a huge scale, right? So, but the failure of the markets led to the generalist bureaucracy becoming relevant again. So bureaucracy again became very, very important. What does George Gant say? He criticized the Weberian bureaucracy for its failure to bring about socio-economic transformation. And he said three very, very, very important things. Purposes, loyalties, and attitudes. Development administration is characterized by purposes, loyalties, and attitude. What is purpose? Purpose of development administration is to bring about socio-economic transformation in a time-bound manner. What is the loyalty? Loyalty is to the constitution and not to the king. And what is the attitude? It's a proactive attitude. No value neutrality, no impersonality, no colonial attitude should prevail. Only commitment to values. So this particular thing is very, very important. Development administration is characterized by its purposes, loyalties, and attitudes. Right? So you should not forget George Gant. Gantt chart, you heard about it? I think it's come from George Gant. Burns and Stoker, we talked about the mechanistic theory, mechanistic organization, organic organization. Mechanistic is like the Weberian model. Organic, it could be like the theory Z of Auchi, William Auchi. That is decentralization, participation, upward and lateral communication, continuous interaction between various subsystems. It's more suited for bringing about socio-economic transformation. So a mechanistic system cannot bring about socio-economic transformation according to Burns and Stoker. Whereas only the organic system can bring about socio-economic transition. Socio-economic transformation. Now, what are the objectives of development administration? Rapid economic growth, social justice, attitudinal change in bureaucracy, nation building. Yes, that's the first one. In fact, that should have been the first one. Sustainable development, societal changes in the direction of modernity, etc. So what are the steps involved in development administration? Same thing as what are the steps involved in organizations. Formation of objectives, formulation of policies and programs, creating bureaucratic structures, sets, hierarchies, recruiting people, recruiting specialists, imparting training to them, allocation of financial resources, implementation programs and projects, evaluating performance. It's the same thing that when you talk about organization. Organization is what? Objectives. Second is what? Planning, because you have too many objectives, but you have resources constrained. You have limited resource. Third is hierarchy. Fourth is creating those division of labor between laborers and specialists. Then fifth is what's called scientific recruitment. And based on scientific recruitment, you also train or familiarize them. After the training is, they have to scientifically place them so that the correct man fits in the correct job. And once you are placing them there, they have to implement. And before implementation, budgeting should happen. And after implementation, implementation happens. After that, we have to do what's called a performance review. So these are the 11 steps associated with with any organization, and those are the same steps that are there in what is called development administration. And we'll only read about this and then close it for today, because we have almost covered 1 hour. We are talking about development administration. What is administrative development? Development administration means focusing on development. Administrative development means focusing on administration. How do you improve administration so that their administrative capacity is improved? Now, what happens? Increase in size and budget reallocation, increase in diversification, specialization, professionalization of administration, etc. So the evolving capacity of an administrative system. So the indices of administrative development are increase in size and budget reallocation, increasing diversity and specialization, professionalization of administrative personnel, right? And this is very, 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 very critical. AD is necessary for DA. Or at the same time, you can say DA will lead to AD. It's a vicious cycle. You can call it a virtuous cycle. Why call it a vicious cycle? A virtuous cycle. Administrative development leads to development administration further enhances the administrative capacity and continuous life. It's characterized by what's called increase in budget and size. In size and budget. So it may be a 10-member organization, becomes a 20-member organization next year. It may be a 100 crore company, it will become a 1,000 crore company, department. Increasing diversification and specialization keeps happening. More and more professionalism of administrative personnel happens, right? What are the problems of development administration? Too much money, right? Lots of money in the development administration. You come to a DRDA, you come as a project officer, District Rural Development Agency. We generally call them as additional collectors if you are a director IAS officer. Sorry, if you are an IAS officer, you'll know there's high levels of corruption. There's a engineer, bureaucrat, contractor nexus, politician and nexus, all 4 or 5 people together. Colonial attitudes. We are doing it, you take it if you want. That kind of my bub attitude. Centralization of power, poor management of public sector enterprises, wastage, duplication, lack of experience and technically qualified administrators. Name it, all these things are there in development dynamics. So we'll stop here, because development dynamics is about changes that happen from 1950, and every decade we'll see how it happens. See, look at the 1950s, then 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s till date. Then what is the policy of reversals, etc. Very, very interesting about this, right? So we'll stop here. I hope you join me tomorrow. So have a good night. And development administration is extremely interesting chapter. It's got a lot of questions at the end of it. So take it from me. This is very easy to understand. There's no rocket science involved. It's pretty straightforward. So I wish you luck, and let's meet tomorrow for Development Administration Part 2. Thank you and good night.